All right, so welcome to today's webinar, Social Innovation, Exploring Social Enterprise as an Alternate Business Structure. My name is Natasha Pei. I'm a community animator for Vibrant Communities Canada, and I'm here today with Yasmin Nouri and Mark Soberano to start the first of a three-part webinar series. And before we jump into today's call, I'd like to take a moment to introduce everyone. So Yasmin is a BC Com finance grad and a recipient of the Queen Elizabeth's Queen Jubilee Medal for contributions that positively impacted communities domestically and internationally. She's originally from Tehran, raised in Vancouver, and has worked in Iran, the UK, China, Malawi, Pakistan, and Canada in diverse sectors, including post-secondary education, international trade, international development, social entrepreneurship, impact investing, credit unions, nonprofits, management consulting, and government organizations. Yasmin currently serves as a Community Wealth Board operation for homes, as well as helping the Hamilton Community Foundation with their pilot impact measurement project. She teaches various courses related to social impact through Social Enterprise Institute, such as how to use systems thinking to solve social problems, how to use storytelling to connect to stakeholders, and tips and tools for building local and global impact communities. And Yasmin is joined here today with Mark Soberano. So Mark is the founder and executive director of Building Up, a nonprofit social enterprise which trains and employs Torontonians with barriers to employment to install energy and water efficient retrofits in Toronto's low-income housing buildings. Mark believes that innovative business models are needed to solve complex societal issues. His time spent at Ashoka working for established social enterprises reaffirmed these ideas and inspired him to contribute to the movement through the creation of Building Up. Mark is the only known graduate of the Richard Ivey School of Business and to have canoed across Canada, and he intends to combine lessons learned from the classroom and life in the woods to lead this organization towards its vision. So welcome, Mark and Yasmin, and thank you for joining us on today's broadcast. Yasmin, I'll hand it over to you now, and please take us through a social enterprise.
Perfect. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Perfect. So for our agenda for today, we're going to first start with what is a social enterprise. We're going to do a bit of a comparison across the globe. Then we're going to look at some characteristics of the Canadian social enterprise market. And then we'll start to get into the juice as to if you decide that social enterprise is a model for you, how do you make this decision? We'll hand it over to Mark for the most exciting part of this webinar to dig deeper on how they made this decision at their organization. And then we'll give you some tools and resources to help you make these decisions and help you build your path. And lastly, we'll wrap it up and go through some questions and answers that you may have. So if that's good with everybody, we're gonna start. And so as you can see, the social enterprise can be in many different shapes and forms, and a definition of it, there's been many definitions. For the sake of this presentation, we're going to use a definition of Government of Canada, which is a social enterprise seeks to achieve social, cultural, or environmental aims through the sales of goods and services. The social enterprise can be for-profit, non-profit, but for majority of net profits will be directed to a social objective with limited distribution to shareholders and owners. So now that we have come to an agreement on what a social enterprise is, let's take a look at what's happening around the world. So there have been many studies. The one that we decided to feature for today is done by the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, and they usually look at entrepreneurship around the world, but they did a special report on social entrepreneurship in 2015, and they interviewed about 167,000 adults across the globe. And they looked at two measures: a broader measure, which was individuals currently leading any kind of activity, organization, or initiative that has particularly cultural, environmental, or community objectives. And then the second part that is more close to our definition of social enterprise is activity, organization, or initiative that prioritizes social and environmental value over financial value and operates in the market by producing goods and services. So this one is much more narrow, about 31 economies. So the report is very long, and you guys can go through the link if you want to learn more about it, but we're going to look at 3 results that they had. And the first one is really by looking at the phase of these organizations. So the green turquoisey line is more the organizations that are in the startup phase, and the yellow one are the ones that are in the operational phase, which to me the exciting part is that there's lots already existing in these markets, and the green shows that there's lots of activities happening in some areas such as sub-Saharan Africa and US and Australia. There's more than other places. If we go to the next slide, in this part, we look at what percentage of entrepreneurship activity that's happening is in the social enterprise part. So the yellow is the social entrepreneurship, and the big bar is all of entrepreneurship. So for me, the exciting part is that this yellow one is growing as the years go by, and more entrepreneurs that want to start businesses or want to grow their businesses are going in this space. So they're not only looking at the traditional, I want to make money, but they're also looking at, I want to make money and also solve environmental, social, and cultural problems. And last but not least, if we look at impact measurement. So traditionally, when we look at the nonprofit sector, it's the fact that there are charities and they're going through various rigor and reporting has made people feel comfortable that they are doing some good in our community. But on the social enterprise side, there's impact measurement has really helped to lead this and help people understand, are we making a difference, and what is the impact that we're having, and where do we measure? So this is exciting to see that about half of the organizations globally have been found to be working in this space. And yeah, so that's about that report. And last but not least, there's a report that was done by Times and Reuters, and it was looking at 45 biggest economies across the board and looking at what is the ecosystem like for social entrepreneurs to start business. And the top 3 countries that were found were US, Canada, and UK, which is really exciting for us. So we're going to kind of take a very quick look at US and UK, and then we're going to dig into Canada to help understand what's happening here at home for us. The link again is down there, and we'll be sending this to you guys so you can take further look at details. And so when we look at the US side of things, the US has been really driven by the entrepreneurial side of things. So if you look at the parts that they're doing really well is on starting and growing enterprises and being able to sell it both in to other businesses and selling it to public, and finding staff and skill set. From the Canadian perspective, we tend to look at US to learn from the entrepreneurial successes that they've had. On the other side, if we look at UK's experience, they've been the pioneers in the social enterprise and the social investment, social value, and they have about 70,000 social enterprises across their country. But they've really been leading on the policy side of things. So, for example, since 2007, that they introduced the legal structure of community interest companies, there's been about 11,000 community interest companies that have started. So that shows that the huge effect that the policy and the support has had. And as well, you see the government connection and support when you see at the bottom that about 1/3 of these social enterprises have the main source of their income from the government, and about 2/3 of them are actually doing business with the government. So those are the 2 countries that the social enterprise sector in Canada tends to look at often to learn from and to grow. And finally, we're going to come home to look at what Canadian characteristics look like. And And so in Canada, we're about a third of the size of the US market, or sorry, the UK market. So it's estimated that we have about 25,000 social enterprises across the country, which are generating multi-million-dollar revenues and sales and employing thousands of people. They are across regions and sectors, so from urban, rural, remote, and across social, environmental, and cultural. And the size, just so you know, you understand, the size of these organizations are anywhere from 10,000 to multi-million-dollar organizations. And lastly, we're going to look at some of the challenges, I guess, that we've been having in Canada. So we've been criticized that in the past we are about 10 years behind US and UK when it comes to the policy side and in terms of recognizing social value of enterprises. But thankfully, in the past little while, Ontario and Nova Scotia have really been leading the movement and helping us move forward. So in Ontario, they launched their second 5-year social enterprise strategy to help over 10,000 enterprises develop and grow. And in Nova Scotia, there was an announcement, decision to partner with its social enterprise network to help entrepreneurs develop and grow their business. So this is fantastic that we're moving forward. So we've done quite a bit of progress, and I'm personally hoping, as I'm sure many others are, that this movement will continue to move forward. And some of the other challenges that social enterprises have been having or have been reporting that they've been having in Canada is that they don't necessarily have the tools or the resources, the financial capital or the human capital needed. So in this, after Mark's presentation, we're going to we're going to go through some of the tools and resources that are available to folks, and then we're going to touch very briefly on the financial capital. But if you join us with the next webinar series, we're going to dig deeper on the financial side of things and look at what are some social finance options available outside of traditional granting and investing for folks. So we'll dig into that later. And so now you may have gotten really excited about social enterprises by this time, and you may say, I don't know if this is the right fit for me, and how do I make this decision? So we're going to give you some very high-level information, and hopefully get you excited and give you some resources so that you can move forward and get information needed to make the decision that's the right fit for you. So in order for you to understand where social enterprises sit, they kind of sit somewhere in between the two extremes of traditional charity and traditional enterprises, and with sustainable nonprofit and the responsible enterprise on the two sides of them. So if we look at what the drivers are, if we look at the traditional charities, their primary drivers are a social value that they're looking at. So they could be purely charitable funding, so they only get grants and donations or endowments, and then they do the activities that's related to their work. Or they may have additional market-based revenue. So these are organizations like the Y, where they have various charities and they have various donations and grants, but they may have their hotel or various services and products that they're serving to kind of help diversify a bit of the funds that are coming through. And then on the extreme, on the other side, on the traditional business side, where they are driven by financial value. So if we look at pure profit-oriented mainstream, they're only looking at what is my product or service that I'm selling and how much money am I making, and that's really their primary goal. If we look at the CSR and corporate philanthropy, that's more on the I am making money and I'm doing good, and then I'm taking a portion of that and giving it back to something, or that's more of it. Then we get to the green fuzzy space in between those. So it can go anywhere from the left side, which is a potentially sustainable. So about 75% of their revenue may come from products or services that they're selling, but a portion of it they're getting from grants and donations to cover. And Mark will go further into this because his organization is kind of similar to this. And then on the mission-driven, these are organizations that are for-profit, but they have some they're focused on their mission, and they may be incorporated in the U.S. They're incorporated oftentimes as B Corp. In Canada, this is also offered. Unfortunately, we don't have the tax benefits and some of the other benefits that the U.S. has. And then the social business profit in the middle is kind of the happy balance in between the two organizations. So there's really no right answer for this. This is much more for the organizations to sit down and think about what makes sense for them. Is it which model is it for the for-profit or nonprofit? And to dig deeper on some of the pros and cons of this. In Canada, unfortunately, unlike UK, we don't have any legal structure that's straightforward for social enterprises. So based on the current availabilities, there's kind of three structures that we can look at. And there's one of them is for-profit. In the for-profit, the pros are that there is more flexibility around profit making. There is more access to the traditional investors and debt financing, such as at banks and credit unions. And some of the cons are that oftentimes in Canada, because most social enterprises in Canada are actually on the nonprofit side, there may not be access to government funding or foundation funding or some of the funding that require the organizations to be nonprofits or charitable organizations. And on another side, they also may have some concerns and some pushbacks from their funders about how do we know that you're actually achieving the social goal. So this is where the social impact impact measurement has tried to kind of bridge the gap. But those are some of the cons for the for-profit side. For the nonprofit, probably one of the biggest pros is that there may be some tax exemptions. It may be easier to attract the grants and the government support as traditionally this has been the space where funding has been coming in Canada. But on the con side, entrepreneurs are restricted from attracting profits. So in Canada, if you're a nonprofit, I don't know the details, but you can only make profits to a certain level. So depending on how much profit you're making, you may be having difficulty as a nonprofit. You can, as a nonprofit, they cannot issue any shares or pay dividends, and there's limited ability to raise capital. And last but not least, there's a cooperative, which this one is more if there's a need for democracy on the control and the decision making for members who are benefiting from the services and the products of the organization. So in this case, you can issue shares and investment shares to raise equity, there is the flexibility for cooperatives to be established as non-profit cooperatives or for-profit cooperatives, depending on what the need of the organization is and what its mandate is. On the con side, obviously, if you have many different members and shareholders, decision-making is going to be harder, and the ownership structure can limit options for capitalization. So that's a really, really high-level view as to what are the possible options for establishing or legally establishing a social enterprise in Canada. And here are some links if you want to learn more about who are the social enterprises in Canada. These links are divided by theme. So the Government of Canada, thankfully, has started a directory for social enterprises. So social enterprises can go and self-identify and put their information online. So you can go and learn about, if you're interested in what are the organizations, social enterprises in the employment development or environmental or etc. You can click on these links and go and get a list of these organizations and find out more. So now that I've given you kind of the dry academic side of what are social enterprise and how do we decide if social enterprise is really the right one, I'm going to hand it over to Mark to give a more real and exciting story as he has gone through this journey, and I'm handing it over to you.
Thanks, Yasmin. Yeah, so I'm here today to tell you about building up and sort of how it came to be and why and where it's at now and where it's going. We're an example of a non-profit social enterprise that's operating in the Greater Toronto area. Started about 3 years ago with a model that was economically viable, and that was the start of it. It was environmentally responsible. And what's really driving us is the social side, the employment, and its ability to change people's lives. And believe it or not, it's all based around the toilet. So if we go into the next slide, you know, we're all working at our respective charities and nonprofits, and we're faced with a whole bunch of different issues. And the reality is that they're all sort of related to one another. And when we're looking at how to solve these issues or help solve these issues, it can be pretty overwhelming. And one thing we found is that a lot of these issues can be caused by systemic unemployment and trace back to that. So if we just go to the next slide here. So the first thing that we see is that there's, you know, dramatic skill gaps with the clients we serve, individuals with barriers to employment. And as a result, a lot of times people will have to make money in other ways, which leads to high rates of going to jail and going back into jail after they come out. And it creates a really vicious cycle, which leads to a need for more housing, which we can't often solve given the space and the prices available. And then those affordable housing providers are strapped for cash and can't invest in energy efficiency and other upgrades to their buildings that some other buildings can. And therefore they're spending too much money on repairs and utilities, and they can't go back and serve their clients and offer the skills that they would need to continue to move forward with their careers. So systemic unemployment is a huge issue, and it creates a whole suite of other issues. And as social entrepreneurs and social enterprises, we have to kind of look at these issues through a different paradigm and say, you know, what sort of opportunities do these create? Not for personal wealth, but rather for business solutions that can help remedy some of these situations. And in our case, if we go to the next slide, that started with the toilet. You're looking at the issues. Somehow the toilet was able to help solve a lot of these things. So what we found was that a lot of the buildings, and there are tons, residential buildings in our community in Toronto, are using old toilets, which waste a ton of water. They're using old shower heads, which waste a ton of water. And not only can we save a lot of water, but saving water for these buildings by installing new toilets, new showers heads means that they're saving a ton of money. So they have a real economic incentive to upgrade these fixtures. So if they're paying $300 in the chart at the bottom of the slide to get a new toilet, shower head, aerators to help save water, they can actually, on average, save $218 a year per unit on their water bills. You put that over a 100, 200 unit building, and suddenly we're talking about really significant numbers. And the average payback, therefore, on that investment is 16.5 months. You put up the $300, 16.5 months later, the savings from the toilet has paid for the cost of the install, and then your toilet is like literally printing money, and you're not flushing money down it for the rest of that toilet's life. So that was the business that we started. But the interesting thing was that we weren't doing this business to create revenue, not necessarily revenue, but profits for any owners. We were a nonprofit entity that doesn't have owners. The idea of taking on these projects is to use them as an opportunity for training and employment. So the great thing about putting on toilets is that you can have one master plumber supervising a group of 8 individuals that have never touched a hammer before, and really use it as an opportunity to get them into the work. So if we go to the next slide, we've taken this business opportunity, used it to train and employ individuals with barriers to employment, and the proceeds generated from the projects, along with some grant funding from the province and some foundations, allows us to take all the excess revenue from the work and put it into training for the individuals that are going through our program. So we're actually able to offer paid training. So we offer a 16-week program, and half the time the individuals are out in the field doing these water efficiency upgrades, but half the time they're here in our office, which is in a large employment center in Toronto, where they're getting the math that they need to pass their union tests and become unionized tradespeople and be earning 30, 40 bucks an hour. We have financial management, dealing with all sorts of different challenges like conflict mediation, nutrition, really a holistic approach to turning your life around and learning what you need to learn in order to be able to pursue a career in the trades. As part of the program, folks go to the different construction unions that rule this city, and then they are able to learn about each of the different trades and the career paths and the skills they need and the requirements. They get all their health and safety certifications. And all of that is because of this business opportunity that exists in the toilets. After the 4 months that they're with us, we have a job developer who places them with unions and private employers where they can continue their apprenticeship track. And if we move to the next slide, so we've actually been around for 3 years, so this is a bit of I put the wrong impact measurement slide on here, so things have changed a bit, but if you turn your attention to the bottom middle, it says percent of graduates working full-time in the trades. Now that's 90%. And percent of graduates working as trade apprentices is now 70%. To the right of that, you'll see about 80% of our revenue is generated by the business. The remaining 20% funds some of the non-revenue generating activities such as job development, facilitating in-class training, and so on. Some of the numbers along that top row, we've now done almost 6,000 toilets, which has saved 4.5 billion liters of water, which will continue to recur annually, and we've been able to save buildings over $1.5 million in utilities, again recurring annually, and that's really the straw that stirs the drink, because as long as the buildings see value in the service, we are able to offer, we are able to take on more contracts and offer more training and more employment, and connect more individuals to apprenticeships. So if we move on to the next slide here, and click it one more time. So sort of where we've gone is we started at the toilets, and now we've expanded into what we're calling a social contractor. We're just about to take on a project of renovating a whole house that's being repurposed into affordable housing. So there are lots of different widgets beyond the toilet. It's not about the toilet, it's about having a business opportunity that allows us to train people. So we've become a painting contractor, a flooring contractor, and we're hoping to become a full-on general contractor that is able to help create more affordable housing while training and employing individuals with barriers to employment to create that housing. As far as the decision to be a non-profit rather than a for-profit entity, that was something that we sort of wrestled with at the beginning, and eventually we decided to go with a non-profit structure. Some of the things that helped us make that decision were it improved access to funding. There are tons of foundations that are looking to support, and government entities that are looking to support training and employment opportunities, whether they're done by a social enterprise or not, and being a nonprofit we found has really helped us access that funding to put forward the mission, and then to build trust with customers and trainees. If you go to tell a building that they're going to save $30,000, suddenly that's a lot more believable when it's coming for a nonprofit that doesn't have the same financial incentive to push you to do the work. And sort of what we've realized over time is that, you know, we're often running up against this tension between business and impact, right? It's like, yes, we could take on this additional project, but really what does that do for the individuals we serve? If we're only going to be able to pay minimum wage to get this job done, and someone's not really going to learn much, should we really take it on? And then when you're deciding, do we want a salesperson or a job developer, if you're a for-profit, you know, the tension is going to lead you to create that salesperson role more likely than the job developer, where the nonprofit structure really does keep you honest on your mission. And that's something we've really experienced. But I'd say that like social enterprise in general is a vehicle for, in our case, for training and employment, just like a training program is. Like a training program in some situations would be more effective than a social enterprise. But for the work we're doing, the social enterprise business solution model really does help these individuals transition into careers as tradespeople and apprentices. You know, the self-esteem that comes with earning that paycheck every week or 2 weeks, and you know, seeing projects completed and working in a team really helps these individuals realize that it's something they can do, it's something they can handle. They can look back at a building and be walking with their kid and say, hey, I just helped that building save, you know, 10 million liters of water, and it's something they can be proud of. So the social enterprise does create revenue that funds the mission, but we also think that it inherently improves the mission in providing a new way of training and employing people that gives them access to a much more real perspective of what full-time work in the world is really like. And that's why, you know, 90% of the graduates have been able to move on to full-time jobs. So that's sort of building up, and I guess we'll take on some questions after Yasmin finishes the rest of the presentation. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark, for that, sharing that. And so if you're even more excited now and you're thinking, okay, now that I want to assess to see if this is a right fit for me and maybe start this journey, what are some of the tools available? So if we're going to send the first link, which is on assessment. So there's if you click on that link, and I'll just walk you through. So if you go through the assessment part, there's a link on Earned Income Framework. So this one, what I love the most about this is that it helps charities and nonprofits consider on engaging in earned income. So this you can use this if you're just thinking of having in a practice or a program that helps add more revenue to your organization, as well as it helps whether you want to actually start a brand new social enterprise. So it's a bit more flexible, and it gives a bunch of links and tools and resources as well. The next one is on the B Corp certification. So as I mentioned before, this started in US, and they actually get tax credit and various other benefits as well. In Canada, we don't get the government benefits, but it's a really great way to certify and brand yourself as organizations that have gone through and yeah, but keep in mind that this is only available for for-profit. So if you're a nonprofit or a charity, this is unfortunately not available. And if we go back to the link, if we look at the third to last one, the regulations and taxation. So this, if you click on that link, which we're going to give you in the toolbox, you can go through that, there we go. If you go on the regulations and taxation, what I really love the most about this site is that it helps folks figure out which province these apply to. So if we go down and look at, there's like cooperatives, there's business registration in Yukon, there's business or corporation, and you can kind of decide based on what you want to register as and which province you are in, which links apply and which resources apply to you. So we're not going to go through all the links because unfortunately we do not have the time to go through that. So please take the time to go through the links after you get the presentation and discover these. The support organizations are also very helpful, and send us any questions and comments that you may have. And so I want to again thank you all for joining and for listening, and really this presentation for us was to get you guys excited about the model of social enterprise and get you to think about and have the conversations and see if this model can help you better achieve the mission of your team and your organization, and it may be that you have a social enterprise that you want to start up, and maybe that you take concepts of this and incorporate in the existing practices that you have, and that's it for now, and we're gonna switch to the Q&A side, I believe. First one wanted us to go into some of the models that exist, which I think we went into. The second part is on impact measurement. So as I mentioned, globally, there's about half of the organizations that are going into measurement, and in Canada this is in the UK this has been really driven by the government and giving subsidy. In the US it's been more the foundations, and in Canada, and there's a task force in Ontario that has looked at what's useful and what do the UN SDGs have, what can we learn from that? What can we learn from the existing social impact measurement practices, and what can we bring in? And me personally, from my experience working with Hamilton Community Foundation, and we're currently looking at one of their local investments, which is really subsidized housing. The way that we look at impact measurement is less on the academic side, and it's more on, if I am the person on the ground doing this work, what are the pieces of information that if I have, I can improve my work, I can change what I'm doing so that I can increase my impact. So for example, if I'm doing subsidized housing, it's not necessarily how many houses am I building and how many am I giving, is how am I helping lift those people out of poverty? Is it extra services that I'm giving? Is it referring them? So that's one part that we're looking at, but it's definitely, it's an area that's being worked on across the globe, and people are trying to find the balance between how do we gather enough information that help us do better work, as well as not spend too much time doing administration. Mark, if you have any anecdotes or anything else that you want to add to impact measurement, whether your experience or etc., please type in.
Yeah, I mean, I think like from an operational perspective, like measuring and knowing the value of what you're doing is like an important way to realize like what you can do better and what's going well and what's not. So even in a world where you know, it wasn't something that funders were asking for, it would still be a valuable thing just as an organization to kind of, that is trying to create some impact, to know what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then of course, like using that as a form of storytelling, like at one of my slides there was about the impact, and there was that little infographic that explained some of the different pieces that we're trying to measure and like how we're doing in those regards. And it's a valuable tool to explain what our organization is and why we're doing it, and it tends to help people realize the value isn't just in providing a service, but it's, you know, let's get that same service at the same price, but not only have it done properly, but we'll also create all this value. So when customers begin to understand that, it also opens up doors from a business perspective, which then allows us to train and employ more people.
Perfect. So the next question that we have is it's asking for education, certificates, and workshops. So when it comes to the certificates, there is unfortunately no social enterprise certificate in Canada. If you're on the for-profit side, there's a B corporations, which B Corporation in Canada, which you can go and there's a forms and etc. that you fill out and you can be certified. There's also Buy Social Canada. So BUY Social Canada, and what they do is it's more procurement. So if you have products or services that you are selling as a social enterprise, you can go and be certified by there. And on the other side, if you're looking at your procurement, so whether you're a nonprofit, for-profit, government, and you're looking at buying products or services, you can go through their certification and you can identify that you would like to have your products or services from there. So those are the only certificates that I know of. On the workshops and education side, there's a flurry of things. So the links that we had shown you before, there's a support at the very bottom. There's a support services. So there's organizations such as the Social Enterprise Institute that has online courses, so it can help you from very beginning of assessment, building your business model, figuring out how to start an organization. It goes into the second part, which is really the first one is explore, the second one is on building, and the last one is on really thriving. And there's various incubators and accelerators that help with workshops, and Tamarack obviously has workshops and webinars, and so these are some of the main workshops and learning opportunities. And obviously there's lots of conferences. For example, the Tamarack conference that's coming up is really a one-week opportunity to learn and grow and develop. So Mark, are there any other workshops, certifications, educations that you have found useful or you have heard that's useful that you would like to share with the team?
Yeah, as far as certificates go, similar to what Yasmin was talking about by social, like within a Toronto context, this may not apply to everyone, there is the Social Purchasing Project, which is linked into the City of Toronto. So the city has set some targets in terms of social procurement. So they want to spend about 10-15% of their budget from like diverse suppliers, they've called it. And to be eligible for that, you have to be, sorry, my computer just started running around. You have to be certified as a diverse supplier. So if you can go through the Social Purchasing Project, which is a project from the United Way here in Toronto through their Toronto Enterprise Fund, that's an opportunity to open yourselves up to some city contracts. And then, you know, for our organization, given that the trades focus, it was really important to become certified as a pre-apprenticeship provider by the province. So that gave us a lot of credibility in terms of getting our training recognized by employers and unions. So whatever avenue your social enterprise would be going down, it would be good to get sort of some industry-specific certifications that help, you know, push the business forward strategically and whatever makes sense for that enterprise. As far as education goes, I know there's a school for social entrepreneurs. I don't know much about that, but I know they offer some crash courses for individuals that are tied to organizations that are looking to do social enterprise. And then I found also that some of the foundations, so the Metcalf Foundation and Toronto Enterprise Fund, and some other ones I'm sure, hold a lot of workshops for the community and like to sort of share best practices, which is something that's been really helpful to us.
Perfect. So the next question is from Irina. Says, thank you for those answering regarding impact measurement, very helpful. Do you have any suggestions for Canadian sources to follow up, i.e. you mentioned an Ontario task force? I'm just gonna send the link how to do this. So Ontario Social Enterprise Impact Measurement Task Force took a look at what are the different measurements happening around the world and what is the UN SDGs looking at, and kind of brought the two. So they went to various different cities to get feedback from people, and now they have an action plan that they've put open, and that's the link that I just sent you. And so they're now starting to explore into actually putting this in action and doing some impact measurement and learning from the experience. There's also various different organizations that are doing impact measurements, such as I think it's called Impact Trio, which I'll look up the link and send it to you guys. And there's consultants such as myself who are doing impact measurement type of project. Mark, can you think of any other organizations that help with impact measurement or resources?
Yeah, I don't have much to add in that area.
Okay. As we have about 2 minutes left, we're going to go through one more question, and it says, if you can answer briefly, there's a question from, Chuban. About, could you please share some social enterprise endeavors in the rural context? I unfortunately, more social enterprise endeavors that I've had in the rural context are all outside of Canada. So if Mark has any in Canada, please share.
Yeah, so we're based off some work that's happened in Winnipeg, and the individuals that got that going also got something called Aki Energy, which goes into First Nations communities across Manitoba and installs geothermal installations while training and employing folks from the community to start their own geothermal businesses. And now I think like 3 or 4 of the biggest geothermal companies in Manitoba have been seeded through this social enterprise that helps them get going. And they're all run and led by, First Nations communities in the province. That's the one that comes to mind most. The same group also runs like farms in some of these communities where they employ people to grow healthy food, and they've got, I think, a huge chicken operation up there, and then they start a healthy market to help the community eat healthier food. So I think there are certainly, anywhere where there's like a business opportunity, there is also a social enterprise opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you. So so we unfortunately have run out of time. So if you have any further questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to any of us, and I hope you found this webinar useful, and I'm going to hand it back to Natasha, and thank you again to Mark and Natasha and everyone else for joining.
Thank you, Yaz, and thanks, Mark, again for being here with us on the webinar today. I actually just, if I can pitch in for 2 seconds, back in March, we actually did a webinar with a couple of people in Charlotte County, St. Stephen, out in New Brunswick, who were talking about a social enterprise model that they were using called Business Bootcamp, and I can put the link in here in the chat box, so you can take a look at that webinar as well. And that's basically helping to develop more entrepreneurship in the community by developing skills and doing training with any individuals, but also low-income people who are looking to develop their own company or develop their own enterprise to get towards more income independence for those people. So you can check out that webinar if you're interested. But just in closing, again, thank you to Yaz and Mark. Please do stay in touch with Vibrant Community Cities Reducing Poverty. You can receive the latest thinking, news, tools, and resources from the poverty reduction community by subscribing to our monthly newsletter, Cities Connect, or you can visit the online learning community for poverty reduction practitioners at www.vibrantcanada.ca. And if you enjoyed today's webinar, you might also be interested in the next 2 events in this webinar series focused on social innovation. So Yaz will be back as our guest lecturer to look at how impact investing can act as an alternative source of finance to scale your activities in your community. And in September, we will look at how shifting our thinking patterns and our partnership models can leverage funding in new ways and drive positive systems change. So we have the links on the screen there, and the dates. Oh, sorry, if you go back one, the date I believe is August 31st for the second one, and then September 14th for the third, and they'll all be at the same time, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll send you the links to register for that in the follow-up. And then if you go to the next slide, you can join us in person for the event that Yaz has just mentioned, Tamarack's 2017 Community Change Institute, and you can meet her in person during the tool sharing session. So this 5-day event will be a truly transformational learning experience. We'll bring thought leaders together from across the country with community change makers to explore the critical role that citizens, organizations, and governments play in co-creating the future of our cities. You'll learn through inspiring keynote speakers, peer discussion, design labs, arts and creativity, community tours, and over 30 workshops. Themes this year are co-creation and building together, and the full agenda is now online. So you can see the link below for more details, and again, that will be sent to you in the follow-up. And then finally, I'd like to announce on the next slide that we have another upcoming in-person opportunity. This is Evaluating Community Impact in November. We'll be hosting it in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And this workshop is to assist people who have kind of basic skills in evaluation and are working on conducting evaluation as part of your program or project in the community. So you'll learn how to frame your evaluation and communicate your progress. You'll learn about setting indicators, demonstrating kind of contribution rather than attribution towards outcomes, and more. So registration is now open. We've been doing this learning opportunity or this event for several years now, and this is actually the last time we're going to be hosting it. So if you're interested in this at all, I absolutely recommend you trying to get out to this one in Saskatoon. I will send you the URL in the follow-up to register for that or get more information if you'd like. And then finally, we'd just like to say a big thank you once again to everybody on the line for submitting your questions and to our presenters today. In a few days, you'll receive our follow-up email, and that will include a link to the audio recording, as well as several of the other resources that Yaz has shared and the PowerPoint presentation. So if you'd like to send any of your feedback, you can email me at natasha@tamarackcommunity.ca. We're always trying to improve on the experience. So thank you again for joining us, and have a great day, everyone.